Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our Martin Luther King Jr. 2022 celebration here at Lake Michigan College. My name is Major Cooper. I serve as our Dean of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion here. And to start with our invocation, our Vice President of Student Affairs, Nigel Likely, will do that.
Let us pray. Eternal God, we thank you again for this privilege, for this opportunity to celebrate the life and the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Lord, we pray for your guidance and your wisdom as we go throughout this day, throughout this week. We pray, God, that you would give us the strength to continue to press forward and continue to move forward in the struggle. We thank you, God, for the opportunity just to reflect, to remember, and to move forward. We thank you for the privilege of gathering together collectively as a community to share in this work and to do this work well. We ask all of these things in your darling Son, Jesus' name, amen.
Everybody
you so much, Concert Choir. I Have a Dream 2022, The Fierce Urgency of Now, is our theme for this year. And as we look across our nation and our world, I believe that this theme is very applicable to today's time. I did want to share with you a few notes as we continue today. We invite you to put your name and where you're watching from in the chat. The chat will be open until the start of today's keynote. During the keynote, please use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen to submit questions for our panel to address. There are auto-generated subtitles for this broadcast. If you want to turn these off, click the live transcript button at the bottom of your screen, then click Hide Subtitle. This broadcast is being recorded and will be available to view and share at lakemichigancollege.edu/MLK. And now we will have a welcome from Lake Michigan College President, Dr. Kabowski.
Good morning, everyone, and it's an honor to be here this morning with all of you and our community members. This is a long-standing activity at LMC, but pandemic did one good thing for us. At the start of the pandemic, when we realized that we would probably go virtual, we took that opportunity to re-envision what we do here for our community, and we brought community members on. So I'd like to thank all of the committee members, LMC employees, and throughout the community for putting together an outstanding event this morning. Before we get started, we do want to acknowledge the King family's request to forego celebrations until voting legislation gets passed. While we recognize that and appreciate that, nationally, there are a lot of things going on, but we felt it was still important locally to bring our community together, learn together, and celebrate this week. So on behalf of the college and all the sponsors and the committee members, welcome to MLK Day.
Hey, it's Fred Upton. So I want to send my best wishes to everyone that's watching this virtual LMC kickoff yet again on MLK Junior Week. You know, it's no secret that the last couple of years have been so tough for everybody, and I'm very pleased to speak, even though not in person, at least virtually, again, to honor the life and the legacy of a great American, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. He was a trailblazer, yes he was. Civil rights icon who fought to make this country a better and a more just place. Former President Kennedy said it best when he uttered these words literally the day before he was killed. I think the U.S. should be a leader. A country as rich and powerful as this, which bears so many burdens and responsibilities, which has so many opportunities, should be second to none. And that still rings true today. And for sure, our work is far from over. We know that. We've made progress, but it's not over. The ongoing mission to secure civil rights, equality, opportunity for all, regardless of class, creed, or color, is one that is critically important to the advancement of this society and the fabric of our institutions. I am always going to be a partner with you in this fight. Appreciate you participating. Thanks for all that you do, not only for this community, but across the state and the nation. Our commitment to a more just world and brighter tomorrow does not go unnoticed.
Our Martin Luther King artistic reflections continue to expand. This year, we received several new entries to add to our perpetual gallery on the Martin Luther King webpage. We hope that you will take some time during the week to peruse this site to see and hear the creative contributions made by members of our community around Dr. King's enduring message. Some new entries this year include a poem entitled Thoughts of an Old White Lady by Diane Chenault, and a 7th grade art project from Scott Morgan's class at Eastside Connection School in Niles. It is my pleasure to share the first of our artistic reflections for today's festivities, a spiritual Let Us Break Bread Together, arranged by Moses Hogan and sung today by All God's Children alumni and Lake Michigan College Musical Theater alumni, Cameron Hampton.
Thank you, Cameron, for that wonderful, wonderful song. And now I would love to introduce our keynote for today. She is a great collaborator, community activist, and now she serves as the Vice President for Health Equity at Spectrum Health. I introduce to you Dr. Lynn Todman.
Thank you, Major, and good morning, everybody. Thank you. I'm honored to be here this morning to do this keynote. And as Major said, my name is Lynn Todman. I'm Vice President of Health Equity at Spectrum Health. And I'm joined this morning by my colleagues from Lakeland, Nikki Britton, who is the Executive Director of Population Health, and Corey Smith, who's leading our efforts to evaluate all the health equity work that we are doing at Lakeland. I want to, before I begin, acknowledge the words of Martin Luther King III, who said no celebration without legislation. And this was just recently, as Dr. Kubash said, these events had been planned, but I want to acknowledge that statement that he made and that we are still fighting for the basic rights that were supposed to be guaranteed by the civil rights legislation of 1964. I just want to acknowledge that. Full disclosure, and admittedly, when I was asked to be the keynote speaker for this event, I wondered, what can I possibly say that would be notable as a keynote? What would be memorable? And what would do justice to the work that Dr. King was so deeply committed to? And I wondered, what could I talk about in this current climate when our nation is so deeply, deeply divided? We're divided physically because we're trying to navigate a virus, a highly contagious virus. And of course, we all know that we're divided politically, and that often it's problematic to have a conversation or find middle ground with groups and people who might think differently from us, even if those people are our friends and our families. And I wondered, in that context, what could I say, what could my colleagues and I say that would add value to and honor the work of Dr. King? And after some thought, I considered the idea of allyship and the fact that the work that King required, the work that King did and the things he accomplished were built on foundations of allyship. And so Nikki, Corey, and I are going to talk about allyship, what it looks like in our efforts to push for civil and human rights, and what we have learned personally as human beings, as individuals, in our efforts to be allies in the work to push for human rights, including the right to health and health care. Next slide, please. So it should be no surprise to any of you that our nation has always been and continues to be highly segregated. Segregation in our nation has been sanctioned both by our legal system and by social convention. Laws like the Jim Crow laws, which emerged right on the heels of the 13th Amendment, which legally abolished slavery. Jim Crow laws that started to become apparent as early as 1865 made segregation of Blacks and whites legal. And healthcare facilities were also segregated, either by law in our southern states or by convention and social norm in northern states. As a consequence, hospitals, clinics, doctors' offices were all segregated, often under the threat of law. You can see here, waiting room for colored only by order of the police department. And I thought it was notable, this piece that was in an Montgomery, Alabama newspaper, celebrating the erection of separate hospitals for Black people in Alabama, stating Alabama's colored population is quickly getting some of the best and most modern hospitals money can buy. Blessed Martin de Porres Hospital for colored patients. This is a significant step toward achieving medical facilities equivalent to those provided for the state's white population. And in Birmingham, just a drive away, there were efforts to start to build that city's first all-colored hospital. Add to these the colored hospitals already existing and the wings set aside for colored patients and the several other hospitals springing up all over the state, and you get a picture of how conditions have improved for Alabama's colored. This was our reality less than a century ago, 70 years ago, the legal sanction of segregation. And we live with de jure, de facto segregation today. Next slide, please. So our thoughts about allyship are going to start with the civil rights legislation, 1964, in particular Title VI of that act, which made it illegal for entities that receive federal funding to segregate. And you'll see the Surgeon General, who helped lead some of this work, stated March 4th, 1966, that to be eligible to receive federal assistance and participate in any federally assisted program, a hospital must be in compliance with Title VI. And representatives of the Department of Health, Education, and Welfare, the regional office, will be visiting hospitals on a routine basis. I point out that statement because this is an example of allyship in this work. And it was just a few weeks later when Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said in a speech to the National Convention of the Medical Committee for Human Rights, "We are concerned about the constant use of federal funds to support this most notorious expression of segregation." And in fact, the actual quote that Dr. King made that day was this: "Of all the forms of inequality, injustice in health is the most shocking and the most inhumane because it often results in physical death." Note, he uses the word health, and we've defined health very broadly in our work. And he also acknowledges that it results in physical death. This is the actual quote that he used that day and has been shifted a little bit over the course of the decades. Next slide, please. And it's important to note that there are many, many allies in this work. You have Dr. Elsie Kauser, who was a physician in Alabama, who helped provide information to the Department of Health, Education, and Welfare about hospitals who were not adhering to federal law around Title VI, who was shot to death one morning. She was an informer to the Public Health Service that was overseeing and enforcing the desegregation of hospitals in Alabama. You have the Secretary of Health, Education, and Welfare, who helped craft the Medicare legislation and linked that legislation to Title VI of the Civil Rights Act. You have Black physicians, Sonny Wellington Hereford, Charles DeWitt Watts, Theodore Roosevelt Howard Mason, William Montague Hobb, who played critical roles in this. You had Wilbur Cohen at the Social Security Administration, Philip Lee, Assistant Secretary of Health, who was deeply involved in writing the Medicare legislation and linking it to Title VI. Dr. Lee just died a little more than a year or so ago. You had nurses like Esther McCready, Black nurses, who were very involved in making sure that hospitals in the South were adhering to federal guidance and the law around desegregation if they were to receive the Medicare funds. So I show this visual to help punctuate the point that allies are really, really important in this work. Next slide, please. And so right now, my colleagues and I are going to engage in a little bit of a conversation, and we're going to talk about how we have shown up as allies and what we've learned in our work as allies. I'll start. One of the first lessons that I've learned in being an ally is to use your power, whatever that is. We all have power. We all have influence. We all have assets. We all have privilege that we can use to push for change. In my personal life, I recognized that I had access to resources that would allow me to frankly push Lakeland into a conversation about racism, about structural racism, and how it impacts health. I decided that if we were really going to live into our commitment to make our community healthy, we had to, as a healthcare system, talk about structural racism. We had to define it, we had to say it, and we had to be explicit about addressing it. When I did decide to use my own resources to catalyze this conversation, I recognized at the time that I might not be at Lakeland for too much longer, but I thought it was worth the risk. And I'm happy to say that 7 years later, I'm still at Lakeland. I'm still talking about structural racism and its impact on the health of the community we serve. I'd like to shift the conversation for a minute to, let's see, Corey, who's going to talk about how he's used his power, his assets, any privilege he has to be an ally to push for change in our communities and beyond. Corey?
Thanks, and thanks for everyone being here this morning. As I thought about this, I realized that I probably have a lot of different forms of privilege. But the one that I decided to focus on in thinking about how I've applied that towards being a better ally is my educational privilege. I had the opportunity to attend four-year college and then pursue a doctorate in evaluation, a field that not many are frankly too familiar with. But as I got into the theory and foundations of this field that I now care deeply about, I started to realize, and it was called to my attention by others, other colleagues and peers, that much of our foundations and the sort of the bedrock of the field comes from the perspective of white people, mostly white men. And as I found myself engaging in this work over the past couple of years with Lynn and with others, I realized that one of the goals that I hold really high up in what I would call my goal hierarchy is, irrespective of the job I'm in or the position I hold, one of my goals is really to try and use the small sphere of influence and power that I have to introduce this field that I care so much about to new and diverse perspectives, because I think often about what our field would be, what this work could look like if those perspectives had been included from the start, right? If people had been able to share their ways of understanding the world with others to try and make sure that we have diverse ways of understanding social science and the methods that we might use. And so for me, I find myself thinking a lot about how to engage new people, diverse people, people who are underrepresented in our field at the moment. And that's one way I feel I have been able to use a certain element of my own privilege and power to be a better ally and to hopefully make this world a little bit more complete.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Corey. Nikki?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, I echo Lynn's sentiment about how we all have different power and privilege and gifts and assets. We all have something to bring to the table here to usher in an era of true racial equity. And in some ways, some of the details of the story are maybe a little bit less relevant. I've held professional positions. I've had educational privilege, like Corey alluded to. I do have degrees from institutions that are out there, but I think the most important asset and gift I was given and have had as part of my life really comes from my parents and instilling in me this understanding that I had the power to learn about other people's lives. I had the ability to unlearn some things I thought were true. And I had the ability to see and understand how other people lived. I didn't come from a family with a lot of financial means. First generation college student in my family. A lot of things were not just expected that my life would go a certain way. But I think being bestowed as a child, as an adolescent, as a young adult, having people in my life through my parents that taught me that I can change how I think about a situation. I can learn new things. I can act differently based on those new things that I've learned. And that combined with a compassionate heart of being lower income, being around other people in my social circle that didn't experience the same thing, I often felt like an outsider. And so combining some of those childhood experiences with this ability to say, okay, I can think differently about different things has been really powerful. I have been able to translate that into some aspects of my career. I have always been in health, but not specifically healthcare, but more about how do we make our communities healthier. And that ability to really think differently about what makes health, what makes it so that we have health inequities, what are driving those things. And then how do we think differently about that? How do we speak differently about that so that we can ultimately act differently about that as a community? That is incredibly powerful. And it doesn't require an official position. It requires the power to change our thinking, our behavior, our words.
Thank you, Nikki. And, I'll just say, a theme that I heard from both of you is that, again, we all have assets. We all have power. We all have privilege. It can look like the privilege of understanding your community and making sure that that understanding is reflected in the decisions and actions of large institutions who are supposed to be working on behalf of community. It's really important to know that those assets, the privilege looks different and is very diverse. Another lesson that we have learned, and we had several conversations as we prepared for this, but the importance of being in deep relationship with the groups, the people on whose behalf you are working. Often large institutions will make, with best intentions, decisions and engage in actions that are completely devoid of the voice and the perspectives and the understandings of the groups on the behalf of which they work. And so it's been really important to be in deep relationship with the communities. It's been important for me to be in deep relationship with the communities that I work on behalf of. And Corey, you've done a lot of work in that space. And so if you could share your thoughts about what it means to be in deep relationship with community.
I'm not going to lie, I struggled a little bit to figure out what I wanted to say to this because, relationships are something that in some ways are natural to humans, right? Social networks are the glue that make up our communities. But something that I kept thinking about was when I first started working in Berrien County, I was relatively new to the area, and I was engaging in conversations with a lot of different people in that period of time about mainly 49022 zip code, Benton Harbor, and trying to better understand the context, the dynamics, and the history. And I alluded to my training as a social scientist, and I found myself going into those conversations without any real agenda other than to try and get to know that person. But what I kept doing was falling back into my default modes of behavior of being the interviewer, right? And interviewing the person, asking people questions without sharing anything from my own life or my own perspective. And so I think when I think when I think about relationships, I think so much about the importance of reciprocity, right? That as we engage or enter into a relationship with someone, it's important to remember that relationships need to be reciprocal. And so I found myself starting to instead of just asking questions, sharing with those people who I was, right? What values I hold, where I came from, because it's different from many of the people I spoke with. And in doing that, finding an opportunity to really create, I think, a stronger and more bidirectional connection. As white people, I think too, sometimes we want to know early on in our journey of allyship, what is the experience of people of color? And so we ask them and we ask them. And I think it leads to tokenizing, right? And I think we forget about our own stories, and that if we really want to be in relationship with people, we have to be able to share parts of ourselves. All right, even in preparing for this, we found ourselves, the three of us, sharing things with one another that perhaps we hadn't shared with one another before. And I think that adds to the depth of the connections that we have as colleagues. And so I just think that reciprocity is really important to be thinking about as we consider how we might develop or establish deeper relationships with one another.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Corey. Nikki, I don't know if you want to chime in here or if you want to just move on to this notion of self-reflection and questioning yourself. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, so it all kind of goes together. So it's hard to have some of that self-reflection as a white person, and it's some of the segregation you spoke to in the beginning of your remarks, Lynn. Like we're living in the shadows of that still today, and our community does remain fairly segregated in a lot of ways. And there's a lot of self-reflection, I think, to be had about who am I seeing in the spaces that I'm seeing, and why is that happening? There's some questions behind that as well. I think self-reflection is really important, especially as an ally, because if you endeavor to be an ally, that's sort of an espoused value. And I'm sitting here today in front of 100+ people saying, I want to make my life about making sure racial equity happens. I want to be an ally in that. I want to advance that equity forward. But I need to be in a state of continual self-reflection of, if this is my espoused value, and this is truly what I want for my life, how are my thoughts, how are my actions, how are my behaviors really lining up with that? And sometimes holding up the mirror to ourselves, and how are we actually doing with the thing we say is most important? A lot of times there's some tension or there's some disconnect, and we might not even realize it if we don't take a minute to self-reflect. But then I also think that stemming from that self-reflection, we get into the needing to have some analysis and some questions about what's going on. And sometimes those are questions and analysis of ourselves and our own thoughts and what's going on in our sphere of influence. Sometimes it's applying some questions and some analysis to what's going on in the world around us. And again, how do we look at the world around us differently? I am certain that there are probably a lot of people, probably a lot of white people out there that are a little bit confused about why the King family made the remarks that they did, and why they may not have wanted this celebration to continue today. And I would really encourage you to ask some questions of yourself, do some reading, apply critical thinking as to why would this be the most normal reaction? Why would this be something that the family would, these remarks that they would make, and really analyze what is going on, what angles can I look at this so that it can shed more light and understanding. Some of this goes back to what I said before about being willing to learn and unlearn. We have to be able to take in some of that information, reflect on it. And sometimes that information is how we're processing things. And sometimes it's how others in the world are processing and moving and acting. But it's absolutely critical. Without this, we can't move forward.
Thank you. Thank you, Nikki. then we thought about this notion of knowing. Who gets to say what knowledge is? Seriously, who gets to say that? And I think, I've with respect to Nikki's comments about self-reflection and analysis, I've grappled with this question of knowing and appreciating that there are many different ways of and kinds of knowing. And Corey, I think you have a few remarks to make around that.
And I want to read a quote from Dr. King's autobiography. And it comes from a time where he was in Montgomery as the pastor of Dexter Street Baptist Church, and was being pulled between two groups who both wanted to tackle segregation in different ways. And they were a bit at odds with each other. And he wrote and concluded that anyone who starts out with the conviction that the road to racial justice is only one lane wide will inevitably create a traffic jam and make the journey infinitely longer. So here we are today, celebrating Dr. King's legacy. Others have chosen to forego these kinds of conversations and events, right? That doesn't mean that we don't share the same end goal, right? We don't share the same achievement of justice and equality for people at the voting booth. And neither one is necessarily wrong or right? The fact is that there's space in this work for everyone. And there's space in this work for different kinds of ideas for how to get to a certain endpoint. And I think I love this quote because it at once sort of recognizes that people have those different ideas, and that it also encourages us to think about collaborating and making space for others, right? Other ways of knowing, frankly. Other ways of knowing about the world, other ways of knowing about what truth really is. I think one of the things that I struggled with early on was thinking that there is a singular truth, right? Science teaches us that research and data and facts equal truth. But I realize now that it's much messier than that, right? That every single person in some ways has their own truth and interpretation and experience with a particular thing. And that frankly just fires me up, right? It makes me more curious because I want to know what those are. I'm really interested in what people might think and how they might think about something differently than me, because I think through that kind of conversation, we get closer to the opportunity to achieve the mission we've set out for ourselves, whatever that mission may be. And so that's kind of what I think about different ways of knowing. I think we have to be curious, we have to be respectful, and we have to be willing to make space for people who might think differently than us.
Thank you, Corey. And then this next one, I'm going to turn over to Nikki, this notion of being authentic and don't try too hard. And I think this is something that I see white people do a lot, trying too hard. But Nikki, can you speak to that?
Absolutely. So for me, I think so much of this work of racial equity, it's not just racial equity, it's equity on all fronts. And so much of this equity work in my core beliefs is really about restoring my own humanity, our own humanity. There's so much of the beautiful human nature that gets really lost when there is oppression and when there are oppressors. And to be able to restore some of that humanity and find pieces of that are really important in us even understanding what authenticity can mean to us. So there's so much to be gained by doing this work. And I think I've experienced this, I've witnessed it, just like you said, Lynn. So often white allies, white people, as they're coming along in a journey, learning a little bit more about the world. They've done some unlearning, they've done some learning moving forward. It's almost like it starts to become a bit of a performance instead of acting from a very authentic core that wants to see change, that wants to continue growing, that wants to do all of these other things, wants to use power, wants to be in deep relationship, self-reflection, all of those things. It almost starts to get substituted with this performance of, let me show other people and let me go say the thing in the meeting, or go have the conversation with the friend, or post the thing on social media that will make me look or make other people know that I get it. Like, I get it. So I'm going to sit here and I'm going to say these things. And even if some of the statements that are being made are accurate, maybe they do need to be said, there just seems to be a point in a lot of white people's journey where it becomes more performance art than actually authentically doing the internal and the external work. And I would really just like to let all of the white people know, like, this is normal. This is a little bit normal of a part of your progression. But if you are really staying consistent in your self-reflection and you're continually asking your questions, you're going to be able to spot if you slip into performance pretty quickly, and then you can correct it, and then you can move further. Because if you stay in that mode of, I want everybody to know, I want the people of color in my life to know that I'm an ally, and you get so concerned, subconsciously or not, about being seen as that ally, being seen again as that person who gets it, that really hinders you from getting to the next stage, which is where a lot more growth and impact happens. So as Corey was saying, and we've talked about before, I mean, there's lots of things to bring to the story. We need to bring ourselves into this. And when we're performing and when we're trying too hard, we're not bringing our whole self into this space. So don't try too hard.
Corey, thank you, Nikki. Corey, did you want to say something?
Yes, please.
Go ahead.
I think too about the theme of today, the fierce urgency of now, and sort of the society we live in, which is so dominated in some ways by social media. And I think that this moment in time has implications for many of these different lessons, right? The pandemic and the lives we live online sometimes hinder us from being in deep relationship with one another, right? They hinder us from being open to analysis and self-reflection and questioning, because we don't have to see the other person on the other side of the screen who we might be engaging with in an argument or some kind of debate, right? It also prevents us from recognizing different kinds of knowing, right? Because we, again, are isolated in our own bubbles, in these echo chambers at times, and we aren't making intentional attempts all the time to try and really get a perspective from people who might think differently from us. And then to Nikki's point, it sometimes makes it harder to be authentic, right? Or to do the real work that Dr. King and so many others were engaged in, and and frankly, who so many activists today are still engaged in. And so I think the theme of today is really prescient, right? And we are in a moment where we have a choice. We still have a choice as people to go forward and to do something differently to heal this division that exists. So I just wanted to make that comment.
Thank you, Corey. Allyship. We fundamentally all want the same thing. And I'll close with, anyone can be an ally. As you know, there's different assets and power that you can leverage. There's different kinds of relationships you can get engaged in. The reflection, the different kinds of knowing, it can be done by anyone. And it's also important to know that this journey of allyship, and I've had my journey not necessarily in the space of racial equity, but in other forms of equity. I've learned that it's not a linear process. It's dynamic, and it's very, very personal journey. And I have thanked my white colleagues, Corey and Nikki and others, for actually exhibiting the personalness of this, very personal, deep personal conversations that speak to the nonlinearity and the personalness of these journeys. And I just want to punctuate that point, that it is dynamic, it's not a straight line, and it's a very personal journey for each of us. I'm aware of the time, and I wonder if Corey and Nikki have any last comments they want to make, or we move to the last slide. Okay, why don't we move to the last slide? And King says, unity is the great need of the hour. How could he have known in 2022, we'd still be saying this with such conviction? And if we are united, we can get many of the things that we not only desire, but which we justly deserve. This is a very apropos statement that he made, very prescient for the times that we're living in now. So that concludes our remarks, our thoughts about allyship and the importance of allyship in this work to pursue racial justice and specifically in the work that we do, health equity. And I thank you all on behalf of Corey and Nikki. Thank you all for coming this morning and listening to our remarks. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Timon. And thank you to Corey and Nikki as well for your authentic, honest words. We truly have learned something, and we appreciate all the work you all will continue to do. Now we will highlight our Spirit of MLK Awards. The Spirit of MLK Spotlight recipients are selected each year in order to shine a light on individuals and organizations doing meaningful work in our communities. The selection criteria is as follows: does meaningful work that embodies love and the spirit of brotherhood and sisterhood exemplified by Martin Luther King Jr. The organization or individual must be actively involved in work that advances the promotes of social justice in a substantial way. The work must have a direct impact on community members in Berrien, Cass, or Van Buren counties. Spotlight nominations were made by community members and MLK committee members. Self-nominations were also permitted. The final selections were made by the majority vote of the MLK Community Celebration Committee. There are 3 spotlight categories: students, any age, and individuals under the age of 21, individuals, and organizations. And now to announce our spotlight recipients this year, we'll have Olivia Nichols, Jerry Price, and Larry and Sandy Feldman.
This year's Spirit of MLK Spotlight for an individual shines on Diane Young. Diane Young has been employed with Michigan Works for over 27 years. She has worked in various capacities, but enjoyed working with people above all. She is most proud of her accomplishments achieved in helping at-risk youth and adults reach their true potential. Her current position as manager of Business Resource Network allows her to do what she loves best, serving others. She has been committed to giving back to the community and volunteers annually with the following agencies: United Way of Southwest Michigan, Women's Service League, Department of Health and Human Services Operation Good Cheer, Berrien Community Foundation, Benton Harbor High School Concessions, Rural Pool Maytag Ironman 70.3 Steelhead, Senior Citizen Center, Emergency Shelter Services, and the Salvation Army Men's Shelter. Some of her achievements include Career Development Facilitator, MD HHS Systems Navigator, Microsoft Office Specialist, Licensed Foster Care Provider, Member of Charms Inc., Benton Harbor Chapter, BHCDC Board Member, Caring Circle of Spectrum Health, Lakeland Board Member, President of Community Group Sisters from Another Mother, and a 2021 nominee for the United Way of Southwest Michigan, Margaret B. Upton Volunteer Leadership Award.
It's an awesome feeling. I am very honored to even be nominated and then to receive for doing the work that I just love doing. My motivation is anytime you're in a position to help someone else, whether it's volunteering, community service, giving back to the community, it's an experience, it's a learning experience. For me, when I can give back and serve others and help people, just elevate people, getting to the next level in their lives, helping to build their family structure, it's indescribable. It makes me happy. It warms my heart when I can help someone else. I am the president of an organization. We're called Sisters from Another Mother. And we came up with that name because we're different in every sense, but we share the same passion for people in community. So we're sisters because of who we are and what we share and our desires to make a difference in the community. One of the most rewarding for me is we do dinner down at the men's shelter in Benton Harbor. We not only cook and serve them food, but we provide care packages. We bring in a barber to do haircuts. Michigan Works has a closet, a clothing closet. So for the young men, I invite them to come down and pick out interview attire. When they go for job interviews and don't have the proper attire, we have button-up shirts, dress pants, shoes, ties. And these are donated from gracious people in the community that just know what we do and who we serve. And so that is one of the most rewarding for me because those men in that shelter, I tell them that it's just a transition period. They're just at a time in their lives where they are at the shelter right now, but it's only temporarily. And so we just go down there and love on them and show them that we care, people care, the community care, and we provide a lot of services. We partner with West Michigan Feeding America. There's always food shortages for many people in our community. We serve anywhere from 100 to 150 families. We do once a month mobile food trucks down at 499 West Main Street. There's a huge need for volunteers. And not just at Michigan Works. I'm on social media a lot, Facebook, a little bit of Instagram. I share my email address all of the time, inviting folks that have a desire or interest to volunteer. You don't even have to be a member of our group. We love volunteers. We have folks that come and volunteer with us that are not members, but because they want to volunteer, they like the work, they see the work that we're doing. We also work with Berrien County, the volunteer service that they have. Now, these are volunteers that are mandated to do community service hours through the courts. But even in that, they're meeting people, they're learning new things, and some of them, even when their hours are completed, they come back and volunteer because they enjoy it and they like to be a part of giving back to the community. I just would like to say I'm thankful, very thankful for this moment. I love what I do when it comes to community service, serving the others. A big part of why I started, 3 years now we've been in existence, the women's organization. We have 25 members. It is to provide love, to see more unity, in Benton Harbor, St. Joe, Stevensville, and surrounding communities. We've partnered with a lot of other agencies that see the work that's being done and know the importance of collaboration and coming together. In the end result, we will see, we always talk about being in a better community, a better place to live and work. That's the whole goal, come together, community coming together to support one another and just show love and promote unity.
This year's Spirit of MLK Spotlight for an Organization shines on the Benton Harbor Boys and Girls Club. The Boys and Girls Club has served youth in Southwest Michigan since 1998. The club provides after-school and summer programs promoting academic and career development, along with character and leadership skills. The club highlights its promotion of healthy lifestyles for nearly 1,900 youth and teens at their two locations, which is the Feddick Youth Campus and the Jolie Smilo Teen Center. As well as operating out of those two campuses, the Boys and Girls Clubs has programs in Benton Heights, St. Joseph, and South Haven. We encourage you to learn more about this wonderful organization by visiting www.bgcbh.org.
Hello, I'm Mackenzie Castle, CEO of the Boys and Girls Clubs here in Southwest Michigan. I am honored we were chosen as a recipient of the MLK Spotlight. On behalf of the clubs and the amazing work our youth development professionals are doing every day across the region for our kids and families. Rosa Parks said of Martin Luther King Jr., "It seems as if every time he spoke, he said something I wanted or needed to hear." There are so many lessons in Dr. King's wise words that continue to inspire generations of people today, and at the club, we are committed to working together to ensure those words continue to reach and teach the next generation. The club's mission is to inspire and enable all young people to realize their full potential as productive, responsible, and caring citizens. We try to do that in a way that honors the legacy left by Dr. King with a commitment to social justice and equality. I'd like to introduce to you our Chief Operating Officer, Lygie Haney.
Thanks, Mackenzie. Dr. King once said that we are not makers of history, but we are made by history. I am proud to introduce to you two young people who are the epitome of that legacy. Eric Johnson and Deasia Branch, two club alumni from right here in Benton Harbor.
Hi, I'm Eric Johnson, a proud alumni of the Boys and Girls Clubs of Benton Harbor. I am currently a sophomore at Albion College, where I am studying kinesiology as a major and theater and minor. Before coming to the club, I was very shy growing up. It was hard for me to talk in public. I wanted to be a leader, but I just didn't know how to. Mentors at the club saw my potential and helped me grow into the leader that I always was. I am excited about the journey ahead, but I know I wouldn't be here today without the Boys and Girls Club. To me, the Boys and Girls Club is like home, and I know this feels the same way for so many others. When they say great futures start here, they really do, and I'm one of them.
Hello, everyone. My name is Deasia, and I'm currently a freshman at Tennessee State University, majoring in education. I was first introduced to the Boys and Girls Club at the age of 9, where I was also introduced to the opportunities that the Boys and Girls Club has. When I was younger, I had a great support system, but I also used to question myself. I used to question myself such as, would I succeed in life? Would I go to college? And was I even smart? The encouragement I get at the Boys and Girls Club has really changed my life. I would not have the determination I have here today if it wasn't for the staff and their courage in me. I'm so excited for the new generation of kids that will be exposed to the same things that I was exposed to. Thank you.
Dr. King set a standard we all strive for. He dreamed for a better world for all children. It is for these reasons the clubs exist and continue to grow and expand in every direction to serve the young people who need us most. Thank you again for this great honor.
We are delighted to introduce the 2022 Student Spotlight Award recipient, Einish Shintrey. Einish and his younger brother, Ani, were longtime members of All God's Children Choir. Einish is currently a senior at the University of Michigan with a special interest in documentary filmmaking. During his time with All God's Children, Einish consistently demonstrated a strong commitment to racial collaboration and racial justice. He has continued to actively pursue these values during his time as a student at the University of Michigan.
In the summer of 2020, Einish began the process of creating a documentary about the All God's Children Choir titled Heart to Heart. The documentary was completed in 2021 and is now available on YouTube via a search for Heart to Heart, Einish Shintre. This documentary captures the spirit of Dr. King's dream.
Einish exemplifies the values of brotherhood and sisterhood that Dr. King worked so hard to promote. During and after his time in the All God's Children Choir, he has reached across racial divides and formed enduring friendships with individuals from racial backgrounds different from his own.
From its earliest beginning, it has been the hope of the All God's Children Choir leadership team that those who grow up in the choir will carry forward into adulthood the charge of building bridges across the racial divide. Clearly, Einish Shintre has made that hope a reality.
I feel shocked, I guess, surprised, but deeply grateful that I was selected for this award. I joined All God's Children Choir when I was in 6th grade. My mom worked at like Brookview Montessori, and they practice at like, places around St. Joe, Benton Harbor, and places like that. My mom was like, "Oh, do you know about this All God's Children Choir thing?" And my dad's like, "Maybe you should try it. It could be fun." And I was like, okay. I mean, it's like you sing for an hour and then get to have a meal with some people my age. So I was like, sure, I'll try it out. My younger brother was there too, and we just did it once, and then we just kind of kept going to practices and then kind of getting more and more involved. Last year, during, I want to say fall of 2020, at University of Michigan, I was taking a course in documentary filmmaking, and the final project was to make a documentary of our own. So they said, like, think about topics that you think could be interesting. And at the top of my list was like my time at All God's Children Choir. I thought that would be a great topic to explore and sort of share about, and an important topic that I wanted to sort of bring to light for other people. When I was in All God's Children Choir, I made like a lot of friends, and like I kind of, I guess, lost touch with them when the pandemic started, and it was kind of a nice way for me to like rediscover the choir and the connections that I'd made within it, because I feel like I kind of lost sight of it a little bit when everything kind of got a little crazy. My mom is a school teacher. My dad was on the board at the school, and they both have worked for like many years, just like, for the community and for like the children in the school. And they inspire me to strive to do similarly. Other people is, we have family friends, Mr. Mark Moreno and Miss Laurie Moreno. They also give back to the community. It's not like for fame or for any like thing like that. It's just because they want to give back. Yeah, for Larry and Sandy, they're also two people that I find very inspiring and very important people in my upbringing, and even now. I owe a lot to them, and I'm glad that they've been a part of my life for as long as they have, and hopefully for many years to come. I didn't really join any of these projects with the mindset of I'm going to change anything major. I did it because I thought it'd be a cool experience, and might as well try. And as I hope to in the future become a writer, director, or producer in Hollywood, or honestly like anywhere that inspires me. Those are things that inspire me, and those are the things that I look forward to doing every single day, and hopefully one day be able to achieve.
What a fantastic morning. With the pandemic raging on, one thing we talk about here at LMC is self-care. How do we keep ourselves up and positive? And things like this morning give me that boost of energy that I'm going to take forward the entire week. Well, this has been a great morning, and there's a lot of volunteers who helped make this happen. It doesn't happen without funding. And so I'd like to recognize our sponsors for this event, starting with Whirlpool Corporation. They have not only been a funding sponsor, but they have been a leader in our community on issues that Dr. King preached. And so I would like to recognize them and their participation for helping us put this on today, as well as Southwest Michigan United Way and Connexus Group. And I believe we have some videos from those two organizations.
Hello, my name is Todd Gustafson, and I'm the president and CEO of Connexus Group. There comes a time when one must take a position that is neither safe, politic, nor popular, but he must take it because conscience tells him it is right. Dr. Martin Luther King's words echo loudly today. LMC made a decision a long time ago to echo those words and to lead the community in celebration. So we at Connexus Group thank Dr. Kabowski and LMC for continuing and expanding the opportunity to honor the enduring ideas and vision of a Baptist minister and activist who profoundly changed our country. We're honored to be a sponsor, and we hope you embrace the ideas of Dr. Martin Luther King as LMC and the community have. Thank you.
59% of third graders in Berrien, Cass, and Van Buren counties are not meeting reading proficiency. 42% of households struggle to meet their basic needs. Nearly 1 in 5 adults struggle with poor health. More than 1,500 children experience homelessness or don't know where they're going to sleep at night. Every day together, with hundreds of corporate partners and thousands of donors and volunteers, United Way fights for the health, education, and financial stability of every person in every community.
Monday through Thursday at 7 p.m., join us for panels and discussion groups. Tonight is the Dream Update 2022, where we will hear from community leaders how Dr. King's dream applies to us today. The next 3 evenings feature panels by Neighbors Organizing Against Racism, the Benton Harbor Juneteenth Committee, and the Race Relations Council.
There are 3 special presentations this week. Today at 4 p.m., join us for Bridging the Gap in Service. Tomorrow at 4 p.m., the Unified Civic Monuments Project will announce the artists selected to create monuments in Benton Harbor and St. Joseph. And Friday at 6 p.m., we will hear more from the Spirit of MLK Spotlight honorees, as well as this year's other nominees, with a celebratory call to action.
Students of all ages can get involved this week. Immediately following this kickoff live stream, tune in to a K through 5th grade children's book read-in hosted by Niles District Library. Additional read-ins are Tuesday at 10:30 a.m. and Friday at 1:30 p.m. Junior high and high school students are invited to participate in History B on Friday at 3 p.m. The winners will receive gift cards and certificates to display at their schools.
Artists of all ages and experience levels are encouraged to submit reflections on this year's theme, I Have a Dream 2022, The Fierce Urgency of Now. Submissions may be in the form of visual artwork, dance, music, poetry, photography, short stories, spoken word, theatrical presentations, or other creative works. Families can pick up a fundle from Krasl Arts Center or participate in local libraries. This year's fundles include all of the information and materials to create a sculpture inspired by Dr. King.
The Lake Michigan College Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion homepage is a great resource that is maintained all year round. In addition to this week's events, you'll find information on groups that meet regularly in our community to address racism and social justice, a list of books, movies, podcasts, and other media that touch on DEI topics for all types of diverse populations, and an underrepresented business directory to help you shop local and shop to make a difference.
There are a variety of ways that you can serve your community this week. If you're looking to get actively involved, you can help sort donations and restock shelves at the Mosaic Resale Shop, restore natural habitats at the Surrett Nature Center, or distribute cases of water to Benton Harbor City residents. Go to volunteer.uwsm.org to see the options and sign up. If challenging your brain is more your style, then consider taking part in the 21-Day Equity Challenge. This self-guided learning journey is a great way to learn about the history and impacts of racism and how it has shaped the lives of people in Southwest Michigan, while inspiring participants with resources and tools to build racial equity in their work and lives. Food insecurity is still a major concern for many families in Southwest Michigan. In honor of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., you can help us raise money to support local food pantries. Donations can be made by going to uwsm.org and click on Donate in the top right corner. United Way of Southwest Michigan will direct funds raised throughout Martin Luther King Week to food pantries in Berrien, Cass, and Van Buren counties. To donate to our virtual food drive, please be sure to put MLK22 in the memo field of the donation form. You can also serve our community by donating blood. Each year, approximately 6.8 million people in the United States donate blood. Annually, this adds up to 13.6 million units of blood collected for donation in the United States. Donated blood helps people who have lost blood in an accident or who have an illness such as cancer, anemia, sickle cell disease, or hemophilia. A blood drive will be held on Wednesday, January 19th from 8 a.m. to 1:30 p.m. in the gymnasium at Lake Michigan College's Benton Harbor campus. Please remember that face masks are required on campus. Proof of identification is required. Individuals must wait 2 days after a COVID vaccine vaccination to donate blood. Individuals that have had COVID-19 may donate blood 14 days after being symptom-free. Registration is highly recommended. However, walk-ins are welcome. You can register in advance by calling 1-866-642-5663 or by visiting donate.michigan.versity.org.
Hi, welcome back. As you can see, we have a lot of great events scheduled for you virtually this week, as well as ways that you can serve your community and others. I want to take this time to thank all of my committee members for this great celebration this week, as well, and especially my co-chairs, Grace, Mike, and Jen. And now we'll end with another performance by our Lake Michigan College Concert Choir.